Welcome back to Z-Speed and thanks for tuning back in. Today we'll be installing a Mishimoto Catch Can on our 10th Gen Civic Si. So if you're interested in learning how to do that, just stay tuned. When it comes to catch cans for your Honda Civic, there's quite a few different brands to choose from. I ended up choosing the Mishimoto Catch Can due to the high quality billet aluminum construction and the custom mounting bracket that mounts your catch can up against the firewall to the rear of the engine bay. This catch can also comes with pre-molded hoses, clamps, and all the hardware you'll need for a clean and simple install. So if you're wondering why you'd even want to install a catch can on the 1.5 liter turbo engine on this Honda Civic is because it's a direct injection engine, which means they tend to accumulate deposits on the intake valves. So if we can decrease blow-by gases from accumulating on the backside of the intake valves, we'll have a much healthier engine. And I'll leave a link to a video below that goes in depth on blow-by gases and direct injection engines below. So, in a nutshell, we'll be removing these two 10mm bolts, removing that bracket, pulling our fuel line out of the way, placing this bracket up against the back of the firewall, bolting everything back together. That'll give us a nice, convenient place to mount the catch can up against the rear of the engine bay. So I'm going to get started removing these two 10mm bolts with a 1/4 inch ratchet and a extended 10mm socket. You can see it's pretty easy to remove. Be a little gentle. You can see there was a little bit of flex going on when I started to break these two loose. You don't want to damage the fuel line behind this bracket here, so be kind of gentle. You can see some movement going on there. And I actually just loosened this lower 10mm bolt and dropped the bracket down so I can visualize what's going on here with the fuel line. Now we can see that we need to remove a clip from the hard line right here and a clip from the soft line on this side. Pull the fuel line out of the way and hang it up here, and then we can access the rest of the fuel line bracket. So let's go ahead and start with the rubber side of the fuel line. It looks like it's going to be pretty simple to remove the fuel line from this little plastic clamp here. Basically, all we have to do is just slightly spread this clamp and slide the fuel line right out. So, I mean, it doesn't really get much easier than that. And let's go ahead and pull this thing out. So you can see I'm just going to kind of stretch the bottom of the clamp. Sorry, my hand's in the way. And bam, it came right out. Actually, I didn't really even stretch the clamp. It just slid right out. Okay, next we're going to remove this plastic clip from the metal part of the fuel line. You can see it's held in there pretty secure with that. This is going to be a little trickier, but not too bad. You're going to need a little small flathead screwdriver. And I know my hand was in the way there, so I'm going to kind of go over exactly what happened. You can see the bottom of the clip right there. That has to be depressed to get it to break loose. So get your screwdriver right in there, and then you can lift up the clip with your other hand, and now we can slide the metal part of the fuel line out of the clip and up and out of our way here. Just be real gentle with it. You can see now we have clear access to these two bolts right here. Need to remove those next. So I'm going to use a 10mm socket with an extension to break these two loose. Once you break them loose, they spin out relatively easy, so you can just spin them out by hand here. Just be careful not to drop your bolts down the engine bay. Now, once you remove this one, the whole bracket is going to come off the back of the firewall here, so just go real slow. You don't want to lose any parts here. And you can see now I've got this out of the way. Now the fuel line will just stay suspended by itself. You don't have to worry about that. And now we've got the bracket out of the way. Okay, now what we're going to do is assemble the catch can. There's not a lot to it. We're going to screw these two ports into the catch can, and then we're going to loosely attach the bracket to the top of the catch can right up here. And you'll need a 11/16 inch opening wrench to screw those two ports onto the catch can. But before we do any of that, let's go ahead and look inside the catch can itself. So there's a nice rubber O-ring that keeps this thing sealed up nice and tight, and it unscrews pretty easily. You can see this nice sized baffle right here that will keep all the blow-by gases from getting into this 50 micron filter right here. So once the blow-by gases come into the catch can, they'll kind of be pushed down into the bottom of the catch can, and then there's some space between this baffle and this 50 micron filter that allow just clean air or filtered air back into the intake manifold itself, leaving all the water vapor, gas, and oil vapor down in the bottom of the catch can. So we'll just have nice clean air getting into our intake manifold. Okay, at this point I've already attached the hose inlet adapters to the top of the catch can with the opening wrench. Just make sure they're nice and snugged up and you'll be fine. Now I'm using a small Allen wrench to break these 3 little bolts loose on the top of the lid so we can loosely attach the mounting bracket to the top of the catch can. Okay, let's talk about the orientation of the mounting bracket onto the top of the catch can. You see the out hose adapter facing towards us. That's the orientation you want to have the catch can in when you place this mounting bracket on top of the catch can. Now we're going to loosely attach all 3 of these little bolts to the bracket here. We're not going to tighten them down yet because we may need to slightly adjust the catch can position once we place it back in the vehicle and attach the 2 hoses to the catch can. Next up, we need to remove this hose, which leads from the valve cover to the intake manifold. That's the positive crankcase ventilation system. Let's start off by removing the hose clamp that attaches the hose to the valve cover itself. You can see I've got some needle nose pliers right here. These are angled needle nose pliers, but if you don't have these, you can use regular ones. You should be able to get them in there fairly easy. Just squeeze it together and then slide it down the hose a little ways, and then you can remove the end of the hose from the valve cover itself. Now it's time to remove the hose clamp that attaches the other end of the hose to the intake manifold, and I've got some more angled needle nose pliers here, and I was able to get a hold of it pretty quickly and slide it up onto the hose and get it off the intake manifold here. I'll give you a better angle here to see exactly what I just did in a second. Here it is right here. You can see where I've removed the clamp and slid it up onto the hose. Now we can take this hose, pull it off of the intake manifold, and pull the other end off of the valve cover and remove it from the engine bay. So you can see this end of the hose came loose pretty easily, but the side that was attached to the intake manifold was really stuck on there pretty tight. So I had to grab my needle nose pliers and give it a little turn. You know, sometimes you have to coax the hose a little bit by tweaking it with these needle nose pliers. Once I kind of broke it loose with the needle nose pliers, I was able to go ahead and remove it off the intake manifold. Now we're finally ready to place the catch can onto the firewall in the vehicle here. So that's the first thing that goes into the vehicle is the catch can bracket right up against the firewall right here. And next up, you're going to go ahead and grab the fuel line bracket right here, and then you're going to line it up with the catch can bracket right here on the back of the firewall. And just be careful when you're maneuvering around the fuel line. You don't want to damage that at all. Be very gentle with that. And once you get them lined up, hopefully you'll have your 10 mil bolt laying somewhere pretty close so you can get your hand on it and then thread it through one of the holes that'll go through the fuel line bracket and through the catch can bracket and into the firewall. Then you want to loosely thread that in there, then tighten it up a little bit so then you can let go of everything and grab your other bolt and then put it through both the brackets again as well. And then we can tighten those down. Okay, now that I've got the one bolt semi-snug, I'm going to go ahead and place the other bolt through both the brackets into the firewall. You can see that the fuel line is in the way again, so I'm going to gently lift that on top of the bracket like we did earlier, and we're going to go ahead and place the second bolt in here. Make sure you snug that one up by hand. You don't want to cross thread that, so I would recommend using your hands here instead of using any power tools at all. But once you get both the bolts in there, make sure that both the brackets are lined up and straightened as much as possible, and then you're going to go ahead and snug them up by hand. You don't have to put too much torque on these, but just make sure they're nice and tight. Okay, now that the bracket's installed, we can reinstall the fuel line back into the two clips here. Now, I don't know if you can see it very clearly, but there is a little notch, and it's right there, just a tiny little notch. You want to line that up to the edge of that plastic clip. So first I'm going to go over here to the rubber part of the fuel line, clip that back in, which is very easy to do, and that'll kind of help us line up this clip on the other side on the hard line, or the metal part of the fuel line here. So now I've got that little notch right at the edge. You can see I just pushed the clip and clipped it back in. It was pretty simple, but you want to make sure that little notch is to the left of the clip. Now we can go ahead and swing this piece back into position. Remember, we left it loosely bolted up there and hanging there from earlier. Now all we have to do is just place this last 10 mil bolt in here and snug it back up. You can see why we needed to leave the catch can a little bit loose so we can maneuver around this little part of the clamp here. So once you get this placed back in, go ahead and snug it up. Don't forget to snug up the bottom bolt as well. Now it's time to place the tubing onto the catch can. We're going to start off with the outlet tube to the intake manifold, and this is the 90-degree angle tube right here. We're going to place it on the outlet side, and this is the inlet, this is the outlet. Now we're going to go ahead and place the angle tube right onto the outlet here. It pushes right on there pretty easily, and now we're going to go ahead and push this tube onto the intake manifold. And at first I thought maybe I should go underneath this tube right here, and then I realized nope, we're going to go on top of this tube just like this. So I go ahead and snug that tube down into the intake manifold, and now all we have to do is tighten the two clamps. Okay, when it comes to the clamp on the intake manifold, this is the configuration or the direction I place the clamp. You can see that the excess is hanging over the outside of this little guard right here. That was just the best way I could get it to tighten up. So you may be able to figure out something better, but that's what worked for me. You can see the other clamp was pretty simple. And now all we have left is the tube from the inlet over here to the valve cover right here. Okay, now I've got the straight piece of rubber tubing that I'm going to push onto the inlet port onto the catch can. So just loosely place it on there and then snug it all the way up onto the catch can. Goes on pretty smoothly, no problems with that at all. Okay, now we're going to place this other end onto the valve cover. Before I could do that, I realized that my clamp was just a little tight, so I loosened that up, and now I'm going to go ahead and snug that all the way up onto the valve cover. Once you get that snugged up onto the valve cover, you can place both of your hose clamps into position and then go ahead and snug those up. All right, now that we've got the hoses correctly placed into the engine bay and all of the hose clamps nice and tightened down, we can go ahead and grab our Allen wrench and get in here and finish snugging up all three of these little bolts on top of the catch can that hold the bracket to the catch can. Make sure they're nice and snug. Remember, we let those with a little play so we could move the catch can around. Now we need to snug all three of those bolts up. Like I said, it's a little tight getting in here, but I was able to get my Allen wrench in there and snug them all up. Okay, now that we've got everything installed, we have one more clamp to put on. There's a little black clamp, this one right here, that comes with your catch can that basically keeps your fuel line from resting on top of your intake manifold down there. After you install the catch can, it kind of wants to droop down, and basically you just clip one end onto your inlet tube, and then your fuel line will snap right in to the bottom part of the clip right here, and it just keeps it tucked up high. You can see that it comes in right here. There's the other part of the fuel line. So it tends to want to droop down and rest on the corner down here of the intake manifold. I didn't notice it at first, and I was kind of wondering what's this clip for, and then I realized, hey, this fuel line's kind of dipping down and hanging on top of the intake manifold. So that clip is nice. It keeps it from drooping down and touching the intake manifold. So don't forget to add this clip. It's definitely necessary. I'm glad they included this with the kit. Now this final step is optional, but I'm going to go ahead and place this Mishimoto air freshener on my rear view mirror. It not only looks pretty cool, but it smells pretty good too. So this should complete the look, and once we get this hung on our rear view mirror, we can go ahead and crank up the engine and check for any hose leaks in the engine bay. So now that the engine is started, you want to go ahead and place your hand in the engine bay around all the hose clamps, and you want to try to feel for any type of airflow. That means you might have a leak, and listen for anything unusual. It should sound the exact same as it did before you placed the catch can in the engine bay. If it still sounds the same and you don't feel any airflow around your hand, you are okay, and mine checks out A-OK. So if you're curious about how fast the blow-by gases tend to accumulate inside the catch can, so was I. So after about 3 weeks of driving around normal conditions to work and back, I decided to go ahead and open up the catch can to see how much residue or blow-by gases that had accumulated already. And the good news is hardly anything at all after 3 weeks. So you should be pretty good. If you just want to check it every time you, let's say, change your oil, you should be fine here, because once I unscrewed this catch can and looked inside, all there was basically just a very super fine residue on the inside of the catch can. It's almost undetectable, especially since it's black in here, but you can't really see much. It's just a slight sheen in there, meaning just a light bit of mist, nothing that you could even pour out into your hand. So that was awesome. You really don't want a lot of blow-by gases accumulating anyway in this catch can. The less blow-by vapor that's created by this engine, the better. That means less dilution into the intake manifold. Unlike my Nissan 350Z, which produces quite a bit of blow-by gases, this one doesn't seem to create much at all. But any that do get created will be caught in this catch can, and you can dump it out every time you change your oil. So if this video helped you out, don't forget to leave me a big old fat thumbs up, and until next time, you know what to do. Just keep on repairing.